Hi there, I come to you as just another face on a YouTube channel. You clicked on Here We Are. The intention, at least, of this particular talk is to describe to you, as I do on all of the YouTube talks, I try and do spontaneously expressed narrative covering the collected themes over a lifetime of experiences. And my experiences and the kind of expression I'm attempting to relay to you and in general is that of the what I call here the human waltz, or the human dance, we might say, or our human experience, understanding our search for meaning and expressing the collected experiences using the English language as a verbal narrative. Personally and professionally, my experiences extend into the story, extends into loss and grief, taking that to its extreme or to its uppermost, and studying counselling and psychotherapy. I spent 3 years studying psychology elsewhere, so there's been some adult learning and some adult academia. As a 38-year-old, I engaged in a return to education, a level in the UK that we call A-level. Having been out of academia for 20 years, I've spent a large portion of my adult life as I moved from the first half of life, the infancy and the egoic state of being, and transfigured that, or that was transfigured through a period of what I would call being in recovery. I don't any longer identify with that word, but it was the development of a larger story, a larger framework with which to understand my experiences that led me to experience some wonderful things in being next to other people as they went through that same transfiguration, that same transformation. As you'll hear me say on a number of other talks on this YouTube page as well, to quote Richard Raw, if we do not transform our pain, we will transmit it. I heard that in 2006 perhaps, and it made absolute sense. It was absolute truth as opposed to my relative truth. I have little interest, you'll find here, in Will or Billy's little truth. It's got me in a lot of trouble. So, it's trying to stamp my idea of, well, that's true for me. This is my truth, and I'm sticking to it. And in the very sticking to relative truth of that nature, has it later been realized and recognized that I've been trapped in a lie. Paradox of the mystery, for sure. But in terms of an absolute truth, the whole dance of this shaped person, this person's walk through life, has been the uncovering of that and the final recognition of that as a what I would have called at the time a spiritual experience. That was not spiritual as in woo-woo or new age of some kind like that, but the emotional and holistic, fullest recognition of my true nature, my own being, the ever-present essence of my own being, and recognizing that that had always been the case, that I've never left right here, right now. I have always been me. But let's say that without the me, I have always been. And that very being has become embodied since then. So I've had a few years of being radically okay in the midst of the human experience, sometimes descending into difficulty, struggle, one might say suffering, or descending into the void, descending into new, using this phrase loosely, dark nights of the soul. And those aren't catastrophic, depressive states, though they can be and have been, but those are a descent into one's own story, to recognize that which in that story is a lie with a small l, and in so doing to uncover absolute truth with a capital T, as something that was at the core all along. So in the midst of suffering is a kernel of truth that once one unpacks the layers of the onion of the suffering we're going through, what is realized is that kernel of truth is in fact the whole of the field, we might say. And of course some of the principles of the learning that I've been through are present in the very notion of how I articulated that or how it was articulated. So there's been a period of recovery, a period of adult academia. There's been an intense period of substance misuse, which was a spiritual program for life that gave me much comfort at the time. It nullified the constant mourning, wakening to the collapse of the ego self, as the programs and practices and principles I was given and had for the first half of life, I would wake up to the inability to live up to those. So in the attempt to modulate and improve a self-improvement program and to help the self or self-help, in the constant failing of the next plan of how that was going to look like, now I'm an astronaut, now I'm a musician, now I work in a factory, now I'm a baker, now I'm a candlestick maker, now I'm a spiritual teacher, now I'm a recovering giant, now I'm a platform speaker, now I'm a YouTube speaker. In the constant collapse of these versions of the idea of self that one thought one was next going to be if I tried hard enough, in the collapse of all of those, again rose that same sense of absolute truth as an ever-present state, as a never-absent state, as a constant, as an undivided state, as a, in the end, stateless state. So there's been seasons of substance misuse and a lot of help being set free from that. And as I articulated earlier, it was a motion into a larger story than my own self-story and my own self-improvement programs. There has been, as a consequence of that, the capacity to look life in its eyes and say, okay, come, it's fine. Because once connected to the larger story, the larger framework, one is able to move into that sense of separation and sense of self and the sense of aloneness and the sense of the collapse of that being a lone wolf navigating a world of difference and forms and otherness. That has been safe and been trusted because there is a larger story at work and there is a larger narrative, and one has successfully survived numerous experiences of that. It's a constancy when we really look, when we look each day to the end of the day and we feel like the day hasn't gone the way we thought it was going to go, or our vast plans have come to collapse on that very day. We might have worked for months or years on a project or a decade on a marriage or relationship, or aimed towards a promotion or a successful outcome where we thought, and this time I'll finally arrive and everything will be cool and well with me and I'll finally be happy. And we come to a space of the simple prosaic thought that says, that identifies and articulates that isn't the case. That out of the last 25, 30, 40 years of the direction we've been travelling in has ended. Then that's, of course, that's a devastating thing. Let's not be glib about that. But from this personality's point of view, there's been sufficient experiences of knowing that, and these are really the greatest grace gifts, are the times we constantly hit ourselves up against the wall. It's just come to mind the wonderful Thomas Merton phrase, we can spend our lives climbing a ladder only to find at the end of life that it's been leaning against the wrong wall. Now I've been blessed since childhood to see the fallacy of the ladder that I've been climbing. Even though those were righteous ladders, the loss of a parent in childhood was a ladder that meant that I would be safely parented through a life story, and my parent would become an elder and show me how to do that, as well as having shown me everything else along the way. And I would be held or have a place to retreat to as an adult human being. That would be around, my parents and the safety and comfort of that. That wasn't the case. My mother died when I was 11. And so there was the thrusting into an adult experience at a young age Previously, I've said at an all too young age, but it's simply a young age. Time, there's another question there, but it does bear some relevance on the story. So there was a seeming time when the certainty of the evaporation of my mother as a body-mind, in this material plane at least anyway, occurred, and then being absolutely magnetized and conditioned and trapped, and righteously as a young child walking out into that world of forms and objects and feelings and thoughts and ideas and concepts about who I should be, where I was going, and time. There was a walking out into that without that maternal energy and without that set of skills given by the feminine parent. And there is absolutely 100% virtue in both masculine parenting, feminine parenting. Both have value. Both are arguably essential. And perhaps neither are ultimately essential, because we still navigate a world anyway in order to try and find who I am. And there's a moving out from that initial conditioning and that parenting energy anyway that we all undertake and all go through in order to make our way in a world and try to practice the principles we've been given as minors, and the sins of our fathers and the mechanisms and the dysfunctions of chains of family trauma or just family teaching and the way we do things around here. There's a moving out from that anyway. It's a wonderful story as an aside of the Aboriginal tribe that at a certain age the young male is taken out of the community, away from that home love, away from that parenting love. And on the night of the full moon, the young male sits blindfolded by his father and he hears his father walking away, to be left there. And of course this is to initiate the young male into adult life by the collapse of that fragile ego sense of self that we go through in other ways as a so-called Western, so-called civilized, largely uncivilized at times, peoples. But the loss of initiation rites has caused us a great deal of difficulty around men. In the country I live in, young men tend to initiate themselves and others by brushing up against each other, which is the root cause, one of the root causes at least, of why we have so many young people harming each other, killing each other, shooting each other and stabbing each other, because they are in an age range in which transformation is inherent and endemic, and we don't have a social and cultural tool set with which to do that. Football used to be a thing in the country I live in. Soccer used to be a thing, so there would be that, but of course not everyone's engaged in that. Regardless, the young Aboriginal boy sits blindfolded. He hears the movement of insects, the howls of the wildlife, and he moves through a place of terror where his skill set that he's been given by his parents is absolutely useless. And as light begins to crack through into the day, through into his psyche, through the blindfold that he's still wearing as he sits by the tree, and he begins to see day, and at a certain point he realizes it's time to remove the blindfold. And of course, as he removes the blindfold, he finds that his father's been sitting there the whole night, waiting for him to come back a man. Now I know I've been through processes like that, and I continue to go through processes like that, where life has been moving in a particular direction, or I've reached a place of satisfaction, relative seeming satisfaction. I've reached a place of happiness where perhaps the preceding work or the preceding surrender of the work that I'd done that had failed, okay, I can't do it, I surrender back to the larger story, has brought me to a place of happiness. And of course this is the goal of every activity and undertaking, is to seek and find and capture enduring happiness. It can be done. Enduring happiness contains the understanding of the nature of unhappiness. So we don't escape unhappiness, we just know its form and its feeling, and its function and its brilliance and its teaching and its transformative power. But happiness is the goal, and there's been plenty of that and plenty of experiences that have led me back to that and that have seemed to have led me out of that. But the wisdom that comes with living and surviving successive winters, and the eldership that emerges as a gift but not something that we can covet or collect or do a degree in, because unless we live to become an elder, in which our very life becomes our message and our life becomes the expression of the potential that can be seen by younger people, perhaps through talks such as this. Who's to say? You're to say more than I'm to say. I don't know what this means for you. And that very eldership and that knowingness is sufficient and adequate enough to be a safe space to know that happiness is ever present. It just changes shape. And then the movement, the energetic movement of life as someone who's moving towards that phase by the grace of the experience of the one that is reality, or by, to use a religious word, by the grace of God. Then there's a reconciling of that happiness with that unhappiness that makes it okay regardless. As Krishnamurti has said so well, the essence of his teaching by the end of his life was that he simply didn't mind what happened. That is, it didn't matter what happened. Justice does matter. Service of others does matter. As we know, in eldership, we must feed people and tell the truth. Feed people and tell the truth, as was passed on to Ram Dass. But we do act. We do give of ourselves. We do express accordingly. And we do embody where we are truth and happiness and wholeness and togetherness. And that's the message we're able to pass on. Our life does become a message. It's the way we are, our way of being becomes our message, and our laughter and our joy and our honesty and our being and our attempts to collect people together, and for me to eat together in large groups, are enough, are everything in fact. Yes, I can feel I am empty.